Hey everyone, RemanX here, and we're going to go back to the beginning with this WeaponX team, and we're going to start with the Envoy video. And if you guys don't know, I made a video shortly after this was produced with just a concern about certain things I saw. And we're going to revisit that right now because for the longest time, it's been affecting why I have been hesitant to give ISO recommendations for this team, but more importantly, just some basic flaws that I'm afraid may carry over to live. So we're going to start with the basics of this. The team seems to do extremely well, and I think that there's one factor that can't be negated, and we'll get into that in a minute. The one character seems to just make sure the other team loses, and by a function of all this, what does the other team members do? So, long story short, I went through this and I watched the number of times that the varying degrees of resists occurred. And as time went on, the number of resists in this fight scared me. And then when the stats were revealed and we looked at the stats at higher levels and higher red stars, something became really obvious. That the most likely character that you are to build and promote on this team could potentially be your weakness. So we're going to teach you how to overcome that weakness. We're going to give you, and again, remember, this is all as of the most recent test center, and this is all subject to change, so be very careful. I know this feedback has gone up to them from myself and many others, but very specifically, if this is the way that the team is designed to work, well, this will hopefully let you get through it. But I would be very hesitant in picking your Omega Reds, ISOs, and we'll get into the others in a moment here. So just all of these resists kind of scared me, and I didn't sit well. It actually caused me some, I don't want to say sleepless nights, but some concern for the performance of the team. What this reminded me of was the early footage that we saw of Skilletary beating, specifically at the time, a Black Order team. And so there are a couple of functions of this that I think just don't get represented when they do these type of tests in a test server. They don't represent the power that we have. And so one of the problems that we have to understand is the power. We've had this team for a while, and so we've had this team kind of, the Heroes for Hire team for a long time. And so people have built them up for gamma raids. They built them up to be annoying on defense. And we've had some of these characters with Luke Cage and specifically Iron Fist since the launch. So fundamentally, this is a team that could see high red stars and high stars. And it's also amplified at a very high percentage rate on war defense. They get additional 175 per charged, and there's up to 3 charged on Misty Knight. So if you guys know on my video, I basically said, raid alert, there's a major problem. This was weeks ago. I was the first person to kind of talk about how Omega Red could be the biggest member of the team and cause havoc for your for the way that they performed on defense. So we're going to go into that, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to call out his ISO Striker ability. Remember that if you guys don't know how ISO Striker works, it uses the assist counter data and uses that as the formula. Up to 100% of this is applied at the Striker level when you go to Striker 5 green, and then it gets extra effects at blue. So attack primary target for 251 damage, piercing steel, health from the primary target, redistribute itself. This bypasses heal block, prolong the duration. So a triple tap seems to be able to do an extra 10% just raw damage, prolonging the duration of all bleed, slow, and offense down by 1. Now, I believe that this is probably the best striker potential in the game. Now, if you guys haven't already seen Tana's video or seen other videos talking about him, he was already a character that we were forecasting to be amazing in Dark Dimension 5. He is probably taking the place of Phoenix in Dark Dimension 5 just because of his amazing stat gains. With over 1 million health, the ability to drain health to himself, and the ability to provide trauma, especially if Dormammu is one of the bosses at the end of Dark Dimension 5. He is going to be on your list to promote and many of us will probably be taking in the G16 at some point, which means we may tip the balance. And we'll go over this one more time. In case you haven't seen the video, what happens is Misty Knight targets the highest health. All things being equal, Omega Red is the highest health character on the team in many ways, shape, or form. And if you, as you, again, are likely promoting him over some of the others on the team, it's hard to balance. Red star distribution being the number one problem. So we're going to talk about how to overcome them if you get unlucky or if you just don't want to deal with the headaches. And it comes down to this. So I went through and I was in the test center and I wanted to capture something very, very specific. And so I was curious if after how many attempts, I think I did like 10, what happened here. So you can see I'm attacking a team. I've got my ISO set on my team. Now remember, this isn't the final ISO, my recommendation here. I do have Striker on him. I did try to get as much of the Striker setup. And so what was counterintuitive to me was he was a Striker and he goes first. So he never gets the benefit of the Striker except for the raw damage boost on turn 1. He again gets the speed up, and on turn 2, he's supposed to ability block. Now, here we go. So the way to overcome all of this, to me, was to simply ability block the character that was likely causing you the headache. So for me, the only way to make sure that it didn't become a difficult fight to win or a loss, again, we'll explain that in a minute, was to simply ability block Misty Knight. And as a Striker, he was doing it relatively frequently. And I did a lot of data sets to kind of get this. I had to do it manually. I don't have the ability to sim it. And you'll see the resist happen. So she no longer has ability block. And so that can't happen. That's that element of ruin that makes the team spiral out of control. Now, positioning aside, you're probably to prevent easy punch ups versus the team. People are going to start moving Misty Knight into corners to make sure that you're getting counterattacked by Colleen Wing. The position for Heroes Fire is going to change to potentially make this team an even bigger counter to Weapon X, to basically add more of the ruin. So if that doesn't land, you can see the ability block will go quickly onto Omega Red, and that causes the problem right there. We're behind a taunt, he's ability blocked, and we've got a lot of incoming damage coming at us. And it's always going to happen if he's the largest character on your team. If you don't get that ability block on Misty Knight, it is a hard road to get him back into position to make this work. This team wins 100% of the time if Omega Red flips on turn 2, his action 2. So my recommendation is the way that it's played, he's going to need to be Skirmisher to overcome that. You're going to have to make reference calls versus Misty Knight, and he'll probably be Striker elsewhere. And that comes down to this frustration. If he's not your biggest member of your team, you don't have to worry about it. So if you have a 7 red star Sabretooth is basically drawing all of the functions, and his basic is going to apply offense down, and it's going to actually lean into some of this, some of the mechanics a little bit more, and we'll get into that in other videos. But I want to get this out there because there's a lot of panic, and I think that there's an easy way to overcome this. And so what I'm going to tell you is, depending on how you want to build your Omega Red, if you're going to be building him for Dark Dimension 5, you're probably going to want to plan for the future and potentially make him a Skirmisher. And that hurts you for nothing because it makes sure that all the abilities you want to land happen. Remember, guys, this is 4 red star, 7 star versus 4 red star, 7 star. This has nothing to do with punch ups. A 5 red star versus a 7 red star, those mechanics become a little bit more, and we're trying to give you an edge to make sure you win those wars, because it would be frustrating if the potential apex war team, the best war team period that we've seen, struggle to do what it has to do because of the lack of agency on our roster. So it comes down to that is ISOs gave us agency and allowed us to overcome that. And so the rest of the ISOs don't really matter. They don't matter. You could use them to potentially make sure they could all be skirmisher and make sure you're clearing taunts and the like. Make sure you're landing additional buffs and debuffs to make sure the bleeds happen. Because realistically, as far as the ability block, you can add bleeds and have certain things happen in that order. They had to give it an element of ruin. It can't be something that wins just all the time on auto. It had to have a high percentage win rate for them to push it forward. And my guess is just that they found the right scenario, said target Misty first, simmed it up, and it simmed with like 90% win rate. And that was probably good enough. They probably didn't evaluate it against the 6 and 7 red stars. If they did, they'd probably see that it was there a little bit differently. And their ISO choices may have changed. They may have rotated different ISO choices to kind of guess what we were looking at. And more importantly, they could have changed some of the numbers and said, well, most people may not have a 7-star Omega Red, and they might have a 7-star Sabretooth, so it won't even matter for a little while. And that's the point. Your footprint of your RemanX team is going to be drastically different than mine. And my ISOs are going to be able to be Striker on Omega Red because I've got a 7 red star Sabretooth. So if you pop by my stream and you're like, hey Rem, why didn't you follow your own advice? I may wind up having to, because I'm going to be doing some advanced testing when this goes live. And again, remember, this is all subject to change. These test centers are up there for exactly that reason. But before we panic, there's definitely a solution to help overcome this. And if you happen to have a bigger Wolverine and you want to have him do a little bit extra damage, that's fine. I find that having him land his bleeds and those bleeds ticking at inopportune times when the character has trauma seem to be a little bit more effective. So I tended to lean towards Skirmisher to be able to control what buffs I was clearing and what buffs I was flipping, and seemed to give me a little bit of an edge even when things went wrong. So I did play it out very often when he was ability blocked, in case that didn't land, and I was still able to overcome it, but it wasn't as easy of a fight as advertised. Remember, I do things so you don't have to, and I think I might have gotten myself sick sitting up the other night playing this until the wee hours in the morning when I finally got this working, trying to get this all sorted out. And ultimately, take a look at how high your red stars and your stars are on Omega Red, and you need to make the decision the first time you take them into combat against Heroes for Hire. Talk to you soon.